The Pullman Strike of 1894.
The Pullman Strike was a nationwide railroad strike in the United States on May 11, 1894, and a turning point for the U.S. labor law. It pitted the American Railway Union against the Pullman Company, the main railroads and the federal government of the United States under President Grover Cleveland. Pullman created Pullman City to house his employees. It was a 3,000-acre tract located south of Chicago in the area of 114th Street, Cottage Grove. His workers were required to live in Pullman City. They were also expected to accept cuts in pay and criticize workloads. Pullman charged money for the use of the library. Clergy had to pay rent to use the church. He wasn't a man to let you pay for free. It was claimed in the Call in a socialist newspaper.
What caused the Pullman Strike? Pullman Palace Car Company was famed for its sleeper and luxury rail cars that it manufactured. One of these manufacturing locations was in Pullman, Illinois. George M. Pullman founded the town of Pullman as a place where his workers could live. The problem arose when, after the Panic of 1893, the workers of Pullman received several wage cuts. These cuts were bad in themselves, but when coupled with Pullman's actions of not lowering the rents for his company and owned homes in Pullman, the labor began to unite. From the outside, Pullman appeared to be a model town, and guided tours were given to impress outsiders. The town, however, was not a model. The homes on the outskirts of town were shabbily built, some without any kind of plumbing. The rent of these houses was about 25% higher than normal from the area. In addition, in order to work for Pullman, one had to live in his houses. The workers formed a committee and on May 7th went to Pullman to ask to have the rent lowered. On May 7th and 9th, they were flatly refused. 3 of the committee members were then terminated. This caused the workers to declare that they were going on strike, and on May 10, 1894, they walked off of their jobs. Then, on May 11, 1894, the Pullman plant closed. Who were the major actors involved? As said before, George Pullman was the founder and president of the Pullman Palace Car Company. It was organized in 1867. The company manufactured sleeping cars and operated them under contract to the railroads. Also, the workers at the Pullman Car Company were obviously the ones to go on strike, so they were involved. And Eugene Debs, the founder of the railroad union, the ARU, was from Indiana. He had moved to Chicago, where he became a railroad fireman. He became aware of the working conditions of his fellow laborers. He saw men working for low wages, some of whom were injured or killed because of unsafe equipment. He was determined to make things better.
On June 26, 1894, some ARU members refused to allow any train with a Pullman car to move, except those with mail cars. Debs did not want federal troops to get involved, and he knew that if the U.S. mail was tampered with, the troops would be there immediately. The railroads had formed an organization called the General Managers Association. They announced that no one could tell them whom to hire, whom to fire, or how they should pay their workers. The 24 railroads that were part of the General Managers Association immediately tried to end strike. They announced that any switchman who refused to move cars would be fired. On June 2nd, Walker secured a blanket injunction under the Sherman Antitrust Act forbidding all strike activities, including even attempting to persuade an employee to abandon his job. By June 30th, the GMA aligned a legal committee to seek military and judicial support from the federal government. President Grover Cleveland and Attorney General Richard Olney supported the GMA and began to take measures to crush the strike under the preview that it interfered with interstate trade and distribution of federal mail. Olney appointed Edwin Walker, a member of the GMA, of the position of a special federal attorney in Chicago.
How did the government respond? Initially, the government stated that it would not become involved in the Pullman strike unless a governor requested federal intervention. However, after Attorney General Richard Olney obtained an injunction from the federal court declaring the strike illegal, President Grover Cleveland sent military intervention. The strike was broken up by United States Marshals and some 12,000 United States Army troops, commanded by Nelson Miles, sent in by President Grover Cleveland on the premise that the strike interfered with the delivery of U.S. mail, ignored a federal injunction, and represented a threat to public safety. The arrival of the military led to further outbreaks of violence. During the course of the strike, 13 strikers were killed and 57 were wounded.
On July 4th, violence and property destruction erupted. A fire started by strikers destroyed the World's Columbian Exposition, and train cars were derailed and burned in multiple locations. Federal troops were also sent to large strikes in Colorado and California. In Chicago, 13 people were killed and 54 were seriously wounded. Newsboys in Chicago refused to carry newspapers that opposed the strike. Local people in Chicago contributed to support the ARU and Pullman workers. On July 14th, Eugene Debs and 3 other executive board members of the ARU were arrested for breaking the June 2nd federal injunction. That day, the police ransacked the ARU office and searched Debs' personal mail. Later, the Olay publicly chastised that Walker for this infringement of Debs' rights. Following the arrest of Debs in the executive board, about 25,000 non-railroad workers proceeded with the general strike.
How did the strike end? The Pullman Company, which reopened on August 2, 1894, agreed to rehire the striking workers on the condition that they sign a pledge never to join a union. By the time it ended, the ordeal had cost the railroad millions of dollars in lost revenue and damaged property. The strikers had lost more than $1 million in wages. Were there any lasting results? The results of the Pullman strike were both enormous and inconsequential. They were enormous because the strike showed the power of unified national unions. At the same time, the strike showed the willingness of the federal government to intervene and support the capitalists against unified labor. The results were inconsequential because for all of the unified effort of the unions, the workers still did not get their rents lowered.